definitely going to be a difficult defender. And that was, again, kind of part of the design for her. She's kind of our big, bad, spell-casty defender lady.
Okay, so we are here to talk about the Enchantress, but before that, why don't we go ahead and roll that champion rotation, not the one on the Ferris wheel, but the one from Karate Mike. Go ahead and... Okay, so we asked Karate Mike the usual questions about Enchantress. What makes the champ unique? Well, for one, she utilizes directional swiping similar to Spider-Punk during her slowdown special 1 to cast different spells, and depending on the combination of swipes, a different spell will be cast in 3 categories, basically boiling down to damaging, protection, and mystic abilities. Now, what they counter, or what's the answer? What's the key? Each time she casts a specific spell, she either gains or inflicts an effect. She can cast 3 damaging debuffs, inflict, neutralize, and atrophy, regenerate energy, and block damage, just to name a few. Because there is a lot of things. The encounter in front of you will determine what order you cast your spells in, and after a bit of a ramp, you can let your spells empower your special 2 with different effects. Where do we see her thriving in the contest? Okay, so Enchantress has a lot of potential to go crazy in longer Everest content. And in the right matchup, preferably with Mystic Dispersion, she could rip through some shorter matchups as well. That being said, in competitive modes, I think we're going to see a lot of her on defense for the foreseeable future. She has a ton of abilities that you need to play into while fighting her, and it may take some time for people to get used to her. So probably going to see her in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
So, Aiden.
Yeah.
You were filling in for Stuart, who is the designer for this champion. So I'm going to just ask you a few questions that I had for him, and knowing that you know like the whole landscape.
Most of the landscape. We have a lot of champions, and I'm getting old, and so I forget them sometimes.
Okay. That's fair.
As it goes.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That is fair. So, all right. So we have this spell book
added
to her kit. It's new. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting. I see the chat was like blowing up as soon as they saw the arrows showing up on the screen.
Yeah.
So, what was like the design intention with that?
Yeah. So the the kind of fundamental design idea behind Enchantress was that of a very powerful, flexible spellcaster. If you think of like maybe your old school wizards with those big old spell books and have lots of options, we really wanted to capture that feeling in Enchantress. And so, as was kind of mentioned in the rotation there and some of the stuff that Mike wrote up, you basically have the option when you're going into a fight, you can pick from a wide variety of options. They generally fall into, you can cast a couple different damaging effects. She has access to a few different dots. You can cast a couple different effects that will provide some form of protection, like resistance to energy, for instance. Or you can cast effects that are like what we would classify as mystic abilities, and so atrophy, neutralize, that kind of thing. Or you can do none of these things is the other option. If you don't want to really engage with the swiping system, you don't have to. If you just kind of do nothing and play the game as you normally would, as far as the special attacks are concerned, she will just still operate totally fine and like do her thing. But if you want to really optimize and get every last little bit of power out of Enchantress, then yeah, like learning those spells, learning just like when to use them in certain matchups would be super helpful. I will also say that there is, some of the swipes can seem overwhelming at first, but there is also a pattern when you use them. If you want to do a damaging effect, the swipe pattern is all kind of consistent for those effects versus the other 2 categories. And so you can actually get a sense of what kind of swipe patterns to get used to when you're starting to kind of learn the champion. So lots of flexibility, but also a decent amount of just like other safeguards and stuff to make sure that the complexity doesn't feel like too much if you don't want to engage with it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see someone in the chat saying, oh, those fights are going to be a nightmare, but it sounds like you pretty much addressed that. So if you don't want to interact with it, you don't have to. She still works really great. You brought up an aspect I didn't really think about when I was playing her in terms of the design intention. And yeah, if you are doing something that's more damaging, the swipes are forward, as you would go if you were attacking, and going backwards is more defensive.
Yeah, it's that, and also like the particular pattern of like directions or alternating things. That's the kind of thing that if you look at them, on the info page or that kind of thing, you can kind of see the patterns there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So essentially, she's really accessible.
Yes.
So she's easy to play if you want to, but she's
got a very high skill ceiling if you want to.
There's a high skill ceiling. Okay, so for those of you that love easy to access champs, but you just want that depth, like you want to do something like, maybe you've played other games where you have to like input more complex inputs and then you just get that euphoria from it. That's like my style.
Yeah, there's a lot to master for Enchantress.
I like that. I like that a lot. I imagine there were some challenges with this. Speaking to Stuart, he's like, man, it took a lot to get this in.
Yeah.
Can you speak to any of those?
It just takes, when we do a more complex champion like this, it just takes more time at the end of the day. There's more to do as far as playtesting and making sure things feel good. And especially when you have a character like this for whom the fundamental design idea is that flexibility, well, then the question becomes, okay, what actually goes in those spots? How do we decide what were the mystic abilities? And, at the end of the day, there's lots of things that can go into that, stuff like concerns about our current meta, who are some top defenders and attackers, what abilities do we want to see more of in certain classes. So there's just more work to be done because we made more work for ourselves.
Hey, that's the only way we move it forward, man. All right, so last aspect here is I want to speak about her defensive prowess.
Yes.
If you're able to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, she is definitely going to be a difficult defender. And that was, again, kind of part of the design for her. She's kind of our big, bad, spellcasty defender lady. The way that she'll work on defense is obviously quite a bit different from offense. Rather, you won't have to really engage with, you won't, as an attacker, have to swipe when you're attacking into Enchantress. But she will be casting her spells kind of automatically. She kind of does it through her SP1. She throws out a certain number of SP1s before she throws her SP2. So she will have these spells up throughout the whole fight. And then the risk is that when she has her spell effects present, she'll reduce and store incoming damage and then kick it back at the attacker if the spells are still there. And so then when you are attacking into her, you have to learn what are the mechanics to remove the individual spells. And it's, again, kind of that thing where they follow those three broad categories. There's the damaging effects, the protection effects, then the mystic abilities, and each of those has a different way of removing them. And it's relatively common actions, but you still want to keep track of what's on her HUD, and then make sure you're doing those right actions before she gets to her next special attack. So there's a kind of a reactionary gameplay there. You need to see what she's up to and respond accordingly, or you're going to take some damage.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we're going to be getting some pretty enchanted decks and enchanted. Okay, I'm sorry. It's gonna be the decks are gonna be magical. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
If you're playing at night, it's an enchanted evening.
Yes, exactly. So it's going to be AW defense. And our battleground decks are going to be full. I remember seeing there was a full set of AW defense, Alliance War defense with just all bullseyes. Or is that just going to be is that just going to be switching for Enchantress?
Well, I mean, there is a certain amount of it'll also depend on what tactics are there, what are on the individual nodes, that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention. As far as her as an attacker, those spell effects that you do, they do also kind of build up over the course of the fight. And so in addition to having this flexibility, she's got a bit of a sort of an in-fight ramp system that makes her really, really good for longer form content. You kind of build up a whole bunch of spells over the course of the fight, and you kind of enter this God mode where you are doing SP2s that have just a ton of effects and damages and bonuses and that kind of thing.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Very nice. Well, Enchantress is going to be in the game coming August 20th. She's going to be in the pre-release bundle. She'll be in the arenas. And on August 29th. So make sure you keep an eye out for this camera right here. That's the one I was looking at. Sometimes the green throws me off. Sometimes I'm like, green means go. I'm going to look at the green camera. But make sure you check her out in the game. And thank you, Aiden, for coming in and giving us a little more information about Enchantress.
Always happy to be here.
Awesome.